coordinator for Lincoln Lancaster County, and so I'm just going to introduce Deputy Jeremy Schwarz. He's going to be our presenter tonight. He's going to talk to us a lot about some of the trends we're seeing in use, some of the increase in marijuana potency that we're seeing, some of the different modes of delivery that kids are using, and he gives a great presentation. So with that, I will let Deputy Schwarz take it away. Thank you.
It's a hot button issue throughout the United States. With legalization of marijuana, not only for recreational use, but for medicinal purposes. And that trend is growing and it's sweeping the United States. Perceptions are changing from our youth to our adults and vice versa. And depending on what poll you go with, whether it be a Gallup or a news report poll, 51 to 60% of Americans believe that we should have legalized marijuana, whether for recreational or for medicinal purposes. Some people are very passionate about it. And they're passionate because of their beliefs. They're passionate because they have a family member who suffers from a medical condition and they want to have that marijuana to treat those medical issues. So tonight, I'm not here to talk about the legalization issue, whether for medicinal or recreational, but I'm here to talk to you about the trends that I'm seeing, that law enforcement is seeing when it comes to teen use and marijuana. I've been a deputy sheriff with the Lancaster County Sheriff's Office for 16 years. I'm currently in the patrol division. I've been there for 14 years. I'm a drug recognition expert, which is just a fancy term given to law enforcement officers who have a little bit more training to go out and detect impairment by people who have used drugs, whether that be cannabis, inhalants, drugs like our narcotic analgesics, our oxycodones, our hydrocodones, our dissociative anesthetics, whether that be PCP, ketamine, or dextromethorphan in your cough medicine. It could be your hallucinogens like your mushrooms and so forth, your MDMA, your LSDs, your synthetic party drugs, or maybe even your synthetics, your CNS stimulants and depressants, drugs that we use every day that are prescribed to us, and maybe even some of those illegal drugs like methamphetamine and cocaine. So there's about 100 of us in the state of Nebraska that have this certification that can go out and help law enforcement officers on the road determine whether or not people are under the influence of a drug or a combination of drug and alcohol. We're less than 1% of all law enforcement officers in the United States. So tonight I come to you with a unique perspective on what we are seeing on the road. And I'm going to present to you some facts. So like I said, it's sweeping the nation. As you can see on the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, and Colorado, as well as Alaska, all have legalized marijuana for not only recreational, but for medicinal purposes. Hawaii has it for medicinal. They're not recreational yet. But it's starting to fill in across the United States, and you can see that Montana and North Dakota, as well as Minnesota, Arizona, New Mexico, all have medicinal use marijuana. And it's progressing across the United States. It is my belief that it's going to be here within 5 to 10 years. It's looking like it's going to be on the ballot in 2018. And it's going to be up to you folks to make that determination whether you want it or not. I'm not here to represent any views or beliefs or political opinions from the sheriff's office. That's not my point tonight. I'm just here to show you that the trend is growing. The Marijuana Public Policy Center, this is what their goals are. This is what they want to do in the next few years. By 2019, they want to end prohibition of marijuana in the states that have listed. By 2018, they want to legalize and regulate marijuana in Michigan. And they're looking to decriminalize it in New Hampshire and Texas. And what they mean by decriminalize is exactly what we have here in Nebraska. If you're caught with a small amount of marijuana, it's an infraction. And I'll go over that. I'll talk about what decriminalized marijuana is, what the penalties are. Then they're looking at advocating for medicinal use marijuana in these states right here. And you can see Nebraska and South Carolina Louisiana, Texas, and West Virginia are their goals for the next few years. I'm not going to pick on Colorado, but they're a great case study. They're our neighbors to the west, and they present a lot of great information about marijuana because they've had to deal with a lot of issues regarding marijuana. If you don't know, it was a constitutional amendment change in Colorado that allowed for legalized marijuana. It wasn't a legislative change, it wasn't a bill, it wasn't a law. It was a change to their constitution that allowed for the use of marijuana. I had the opportunity in August to go to Denver as part of a conference, and during that conference, I actually went into a bunch of dispensaries and had a chance to talk with people who give out or sell you marijuana, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. It is not a pharmacist, it is not a doctor, it is not a chemist, it's not somebody with an advanced degree that is behind that counter giving out marijuana. It's somebody who just has a passion for it and claims to know a lot about marijuana that is selling it. So as you can see, there's a total of 1,469 medical marijuana facilities, cultivation centers in Colorado that make medical grade marijuana. And as you can see below, 107,000 medical registries for marijuana to buy it. 49% are between the ages of 21 and 30. Now, how many of you know somebody between that age that has a chronic or medical problem that can't be fixed or addressed through a doctor and regular drugs that are out there? People that I have a problem with my toe, I have a problem with my knee, and the doctor is not prescribing, they're recommending marijuana. And they're saying, I'll recommend it, here you go. You decide how much marijuana you need. I can't tell you how much marijuana you need. And then they go to the medical dispensary and they talk to that bud tender, the person that's behind the counter that says, hey, based on that condition, why don't you take this, Blackberry Kush, or how about Bubba Kush right here? That's an indica hybrid, that's an indica strain, and that'll take care of your problem. So it's not a pharmacist. He or she is a bud tender recommending what strain of marijuana you should take based on your medical condition. And it's up to you to determine how much you should use. 424 recreational for a total of 1,106 when you talk about cultivation and infused facilities. When you take that number plus medicinal marijuana facilities, 2,575 facilities in Colorado, or excuse me, in Denver, and that's more combined than the liquor store, Starbucks, and McDonald's. Now, Colorado, as part of their law and their amendment, not every city has to allow it in their city. So when you look at the demographics and you look at the map, a majority of all the medical and recreational marijuana dispensaries are actually in Denver. They're not outside the Denver metro area. So let's take a look at our youth survey from 2015 in Colorado. I know it's very difficult to decipher the information out there. It's even confusing for me. Marijuana Advocates published this poll. NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Abuse, presents this poll, and they present this study. And you got all these different studies out there, so it's very hard to decipher, even from my perspective, what is good and what is bad. It's very difficult. But when you look at marijuana youth in Colorado, 4 out of 5, or 78% of youth in Colorado don't use marijuana. But when you look at the ones that do, 91% of them smoke. And if they're not smoking, about 25 to 28% are dabbing, which is taking a high concentrated marijuana, or they're taking in edibles, or they're vaping it. The deputies from the sheriff's office that are out on the interstate, that are doing the interdiction stuff, they confiscated these out of a car on a traffic stop. Girl Scout cookies is the name of the vape. The THC content, anybody want to take a guess? Throw out some numbers for me, please. 70%. 70%. Higher or lower? Lower. Yes, ma'am.
58%.
58%. Okay, give me one more number. Somebody in the back. 42%? Okay. This particular one, 60.2% THC in this vape product, okay? And it's being marketed as Girl Scout cookies. Just saying. Here, this is Chem Dog, Chem, C-H-E-M, Dog, D-A-W-G. THC content is 60%. So you can go into a medical or a marijuana dispensary, and trust me, I went into a couple, one of them being Dank. And when you think Dank, it's a low-class establishment. You go in there, and it's not exactly like a Walgreens or a CVS. And they're all right there on the counter. You can talk to them, and they'll tell you which ones to use. And then you can go into other places that are very high class, that are marketed from a business standpoint. They actually have CPAs and people with MBAs that run their store. 47% of the youth got their marijuana from somebody else. A friend with weed is a friend indeed. Absolutely. Those are terms that your kids know. And that's where they got their marijuana from. They got it another way, or they got it from a medical marijuana card that they got illegal, because you have to be 21 years of age in Colorado. Multiracial or biracial youth, Pacific Islanders, and Hispanics account for the top three group of people who use marijuana in Colorado. Now, this is just based on a poll. Right, wrong, or indifferent, this is the information that they have. And again, if you look at males and females, 21% across the board. It's half and half. So there's not one group, there's not one sex that uses marijuana more than the other. 62% have never tried marijuana. And here's what was striking, because I'll tell you about another survey that I just did. 91% started at the age of 13. Do I have any 13-year-old children here tonight? Okay. And you're 13? Yeah. Where do you go to school? Would you mind telling me? Where, I'm sorry? Color? Okay. Last week, I had the opportunity to meet with a group of high school students in Lincoln, Lancaster County. What high school it is, it doesn't matter. I told them I would not disclose that information. But here's the thing. I asked the kids, what age did you start using marijuana? And those that have tried marijuana or use marijuana currently started at the age of 13. So they're starting younger and younger. When you start looking at marijuana use during the last 30 days, again, this is a poll that ended in 2015, 21% of those have used in the last 30 days. When you look at the population of ages 12 to 17, you will see Colorado has a higher use of children that use marijuana compared to the national average. There are polls out there that say marijuana use among Colorado teenagers is down. I talked to the cops out there that are actually in the schools, and they're saying, no, it's wrong, it's up. Expulsion rates are up. Marijuana use is up. The black market, the Colorado black market for marijuana is alive and well, and it's prospering, and it's growing. And I'll tell you why here in a couple slides. I told you I'm a DRE, all right? So I have the ability to go out and check people for impairment. National totals for 2016, this is law enforcement officers that are DREs in the United States that have conducted a drug influence evaluation on a driver or somebody impaired by drugs. 30,687 evaluations. The reason why there's a disparity between the enforcement is because those numbers account for the DREs that are going through the training that have to go into the clinical studies and actually do the testing on people that are impaired to show and prove that they know what they're doing. So that's why there's 30,687 evaluations. Some of those also count for the medical rule-outs that we're able to do as well. Sometimes we might find somebody who's suffering from a medical condition that is not under the influence of a drug, but they're suffering from a medical condition. That's why that fits in the evaluation category. but 25,636 DRE evaluations in 16. 606 evaluations in Nebraska, with 508 that were actually enforcement related. For cannabis, 207 cases in Nebraska, the DRE formed the opinion that that person was under the influence of cannabis. As you can see, polydrug use, that is taking one or more drugs and ingesting them into your system. The DRE formed the opinion that out of all the 500 and some cases, 137 of those were polydrugs, where cannabis was one of the drugs that the DRE was able to call. The DRE did not call polydrug use for cannabis and inhalants. Okay, that would be your whippets, your gasoline, your toluene, your paints, and things like that. DREs did not form an opinion with cannabis and hallucinogens. They weren't seeing it out of the evaluations in 2016. But 19 were formed with cannabis and your painkillers, your oxycodones and your hydrocodones, etc. Now we start getting into our prescription drugs and our illegal drugs like meth, cocaine, and so forth. 59 of those evaluations, marijuana was found to be with a CNS stimulant, whether that was with Adderall, Ritalin, Concerta, your prescription drugs that kids normally are prescribed for ADHD or ADD. And then what I'm seeing a big trend in right now is with the CNS depressants. I've had several evaluations in 2016, not only myself, but other DREs from the Sheriff's Office and LPD who are calling cannabis with depressants. We're seeing kids mixing cannabis with depressants. We call the category, we don't call the drug, but I will tell you the kids are telling us Xanax. All right? If we go back and we look at stimulants, it's not Ritalin and Concerta, Vyvanse is a big one for stimulants for kids suffering from ADD. So polydrug use is big, all right? And that doesn't even account for alcohol, because we know a lot of people who use marijuana also will use alcohol. If you don't know what marijuana is, it's a green leafy substance with stem, seeds, flowers. It goes by different names. If you don't know what the terms are out there, I would encourage you to go online and Google it up and figure out what the current terms are, because your kids know. And it was actually pretty informative when I sat down with these kids. They knew a lot more about marijuana than I expected them to know. Matter of fact, some of them kept interrupting. I almost handed them the mic and said, well, come on up here and teach, because apparently you know everything. Because they were talking about it as if they were experts in it. If we go back and we look at the cannabis and the dissociative anesthetic, which is PCP is one of the drugs there, called wet. That's just a term that's used when you mix cannabis with PCP. How about marijuana and crack? Cocoa Puff, maybe you heard that from the movie with Denzel Washington in Flight. You heard John Goodman talking about the Cocoa Puff. If you don't know the terms, and if you hear these terms that your kids are talking about, and you don't know what they mean, and they're not telling you, I encourage you to go online and figure it out, because they're talking code. Marijuana changes how the brain works, and I'll show you a video on that. There's 400 plus chemicals in marijuana with 60 different cannabinoid compounds. That's the problem with marijuana and teen use, is that it affects the brain. Delta-9 tetrahydrocannabinol is the main psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. That's what gives us the high. And this is what it looks like. Generally, it's going to look like the stuff on the top left-hand corner. How many of you know the term for the bottom right-hand corner? Is that a joint or a blunt? A blunt? Joint. It's a joint. How many grams of marijuana go into a joint? Quarter gram of marijuana typically is used to fill out or roll a joint. A blunt is about a gram of marijuana. So this isn't the marijuana from back in the 50s and 60s or in the early 80s with Spicoli in the movie, I'm dating myself here. But it's not that. The kids nowadays, it's all about blunts. Anytime I do a traffic stop and I smell marijuana or I end up searching a car, all I found are the 2-package cigarellos. They haul out the tobacco and they load it up with a gram of marijuana. Cannabis comes in a couple different strains, or not strains, but, well, we'll call it strains for now, but sativa, or very stimulating. So if you go into a cannabis store, they're gonna ask you right off the bat, are you sativa or are you indica, or do you prefer hybrid? They wanna know what you're looking for. Are you looking for that stimulating, uplifting high, or are you looking for that sleep aid, pain relief, or what we call too as a body high? Okay, so we have sativa and indica, and then there's hybrid. We like to refer to indica as in the couch. It's exactly what I just said, in the couch. Here's how marijuana affects the brain, and I'm going to show you the video. It doesn't link, so I have to go back and I have to pull it up this way.
For centuries, humans have been using substances to alter their state of mind, from caffeine, cigarettes, and alcohol to more extreme drugs. But as the most commonly used illicit drug in North America, where does marijuana fit in, and how exactly does it affect your brain? First, we need to understand how the brain functions. Your neurons are the cells that process information in the brain. By releasing chemicals called neurotransmitters from the axon of one neuron to the dendrite of another, they change the electrical charge of the receiving neuron, consequently exciting or inhibiting it. If excited, the signal is passed on. Though it sounds simple, these signals work together and the effect is quickly compounded into complex configurations within milliseconds, flushing over the entire brain. This is what happens every single time you think, breathe, or move. So what's going on inside your brain when you're smoking marijuana? Well, unlike alcohol, which contains molecules nothing like those in our body, cannabis contains molecules that resemble those produced in our very own brains, cannabinoids. Though naturally these cannabinoids circulate in much lower quantities compared to the large influx imposed by smoking. Specifically, the chemical tetrahydrocannabinol, or THC, resembles a natural transmitter called anandamide. These cannabinoids are specialized neurotransmitters released by neurons having just fired. Neurons temporarily become unresponsive after firing to prevent them from overreacting or being too dominant. This allows your brain to function in a calm and controlled manner, but cannabinoids interrupt this approach in some parts of the brain. Instead, they remove the refractory period of neurons that are already active and cause your thoughts, imagination, and perception to utterly magnify itself. This means once you begin your train of thought, it becomes the most significant and profound thing ever. You can't see the big picture or even recall your last epiphany because you're caught up in the momentum of a particular idea, and your neurons keep firing until a new idea takes hold and you go off on a new tangent. These cannabinoids also affect the levels of dopamine and norepinephrine in your brain, often leading to a sense of euphoria, relaxation, pain modulation, and general enhancement of an experience, though sometimes causing anxiety. Furthermore, there are cannabinoid receptors in areas controlling short-term memory, learning, coordination, movement control, and higher cognitive functions.
Where do you believe marijuana is grown at? Is it grown in a lab? Can you go out to GSK out on Highway 6 and find marijuana in their operation? Can you go to Pfizer or Bayer and find marijuana there? Yes, sir.
I'm guessing it's probably grown in like someone's house or backyard.
Absolutely. It says it's probably grown in somebody's house, backyard, okay? I would agree with him, and I would also add that it's grown in fields in Oregon, Washington, California, Colorado. It's grown in basements of houses, anywhere where they can conceal it. There's a lot of different problems depending on how the marijuana is grown. But I will tell you, it is not a chemist that is growing your marijuana. It is somebody like you, like me, that has a passion for growing marijuana, that has gone online and has looked at how to grow marijuana. And this is what it looks like. This is in your own backyard. This was here in Lincoln. That was from the marijuana grow operations that were occurring in Lincoln back in 2010. The problem with grow operations like that is a number of issues. The law enforcement officers that were going in and taking down those marijuana grow operations started getting sick. The high exposure, the acute exposure to the chemicals inside of those marijuana grow operations, those officers were getting sick. They were getting headaches, they were getting nauseous, they were having skin issues from the exposure to the mold and all of the other chemicals that were inside of those marijuana grow operations. Not only that, but you saw all of the electrical issues that were there, the wires strung out, the water, the herbicides, the fungicides, the pesticides, which all by their very nature are toxic. They're not meant to be induced into the human body. So when you go to these marijuana grow operations, whether inside or outside, they pose their own risk. You start putting O2 and O3 ozone generators, you start putting oxygen devices in there to increase the oxygen parts per million to get the plants to grow. You start changing that environment, it becomes a problem. It's like putting a plant on steroids. So knowing that you have these thousands of pesticides, herbicides, fungicides, rodenticides to get rid of the rodents and so forth, if I brought that in here, would you guys ingest that? Then why do we feel that it's okay to ingest marijuana? We don't think about these things. But now we've got these dabs, we've got this wax, we've got this shatter, this butane honey oil. So if I brought in a can of butane gas and I came up to this gentleman right here and I said, hey, let's go out and let's take in the butane and just huff it, I doubt he would do that. But that's what they're using now, is they're taking marijuana, putting it into a PVC pipe, and then putting the butane gas in one end and flushing it to strip the trichomes off the marijuana. And as that pressure pushes the trichomes off the plant, it comes out in that yellow liquid form or that honey oil looking form. But here's the thing, it's still got butane gas attached to it. Now, yeah, they'll put it on a stove and they'll try to get it off out of the liquid, but it's still there. And people still believe it's okay to smoke. So when we start taking marijuana and we start increasing this potency, we're going to start having problems. And here's the citations on the medical research. Twofold increase of developing psychosis. Right now, you can go down the 16th Street Mall in Denver, watch YouTube videos, and there are people beating each other with sticks because they're having psychotic breaks. The mom in Arizona a few years ago who smoked marijuana got into a car, completely forgot that she left her kid in the car seat on top of the vehicle and drove off. Yes, the child did fall off the car and into the street in the car seat. The child's perfectly fine. But that's what happens when we start smoking marijuana. We forget things. It affects our short-term memory. 8-point drop in IQ. Kyle, I don't think you want your IQ dropping, do you? No. Acute anxiety attacks, we start having issues with those. And then we start having issues with mental health when it comes to suicide attempt requiring hospitalization. And then we start having withdrawal issues. Significant increase of causing schizophrenia. So if you have a predisposed mental health disorder, you're now increasing the chances of that onset of that mental health disorder. Years ago, THC contents were about 3 to 6%. Not anymore. We're getting up anywhere between 20 and 30%. Once you hit 30% THC on bud flower, you start hallucinating. Wait a second. Hallucinating. Yes, marijuana will cause hallucinations. It will cause psychotic breaks. That's why every now and then you will hear people who are being charged with marijuana or with murder, and the drug that was used was marijuana because they're having psychotic breaks. The dabs, the edibles, THC contents are 60 to 90%. And here's the problem, and I'll talk about edibles here in a minute, but here's a bag of cookies. There's probably about 7 or 8 of them in here. This is one serving. But if I come up to this lady right here, are you going to eat just one? If it's one serving? Now, mind you, this is gluten-free, okay? There's 8 of them in there, so it's okay. It's free of wheat, dairy, peanuts, tree nuts, eggs, soy, fish, shellfish, etc. It's good for you. It's okay. Is she going to eat one? It's one serving, folks. There's 8 of them in here. The problem is with edibles, it's not just, they just don't eat the one. They're going to eat the whole bag. They forget you're only supposed to eat one. Wait 30 minutes, see what the effects are, and then take another one. They eat the whole bag. Then we start having issues like the father in Omaha who ate the brownies that his children had, and the next thing you know, he starts seeing Top Gun planes flying by with geometric shapes, and all of a sudden now he's got the judgy cat looking at him. And I'll show you that slide here in a minute. Today's marijuana, you can see the prices. Now again, this is different based on the location and where you're at. Pricing does fluctuate depending on where the legalization is at. But here's the problem. Retail marijuana is a lot higher than medical marijuana is. That's why more people go in and say, hey, I've got a medical problem because my toe hurts, because they want the cheaper medical marijuana. But what's even cheaper? The black market. They're bypassing this and going right to the black market. It's not going away, folks. When we start talking dabs, butane honey oil, honey butter, that's the stuff that I talked about that's at 80 and 90% THC. Essentially, it's just that golden residue that just comes off the plant that's extracted from the butane gas. The problem with that is butane is heavier than air. It goes down to the floor. And if you start using a gas stove, the butane's not going up, it's going down. That's why we're getting these butane explosions. Let's get into social media because we don't have much time left. How many people here, how many parents are on Facebook? Okay. How many of you guys are on Twitter? Couple. How many of you are on Kick, Snapchat. If you are not in tune with social media, I would encourage you to get in tune with social media because your kids are using it and they know a lot about social media and how to get around it so you don't know what they're doing. For those of you who are on Twitter, how many are on Periscope? Okay, essentially it's like Facebook Live. Who's familiar with Facebook Live? Okay. This is where your children are getting information about marijuana. This is where they're learning. If they're not going on YouTube, they're going here. What he has in front of him is a rig for THC concentrates, for wax. And you'll see how he lights it up here in a minute. Or actually in a few seconds. So now he's getting his dabs.
Cheers, guys.
It almost looks like ear wax. Just a little small gold tip of wax. 60 to 90% THC right there going right into his body.
Feeling good.
And then now he's got the marijuana chronic cough. He'll sit there during a live stream, he'll do that a couple times. 60 to 90% THC, and he's doing that multiple times during a live feed. And they usually last 15 minutes to an hour, and he's doing that a couple times. Just putting it out there. Edibles. Let's talk about social media and marketing. Satisfy My Bowl by Ben & Jerry's. Yes, folks, it does exist. You can buy marijuana-infused Ben & Jerry's. No, we're not going to buy Pop-Tarts. We're going to buy Pot Tarts. Cinnamon Toast Blunts. And then you get into the Trichome Crunch, the Keef Cat, Munchie Way. Folks, this stuff is out there, and it's marketing to your kids, whether you believe it or not. When you start putting marijuana into your body, especially for teenagers, you start having problems with your short-term memory, with learning and working. Your attention span, it becomes very short. Organizational skills, problem-solving, decision-making, your perception of time and space, behavior, motor coordination, and impulsivity. That's what I'm seeing on the road as a DRE when I pull somebody over, is I start seeing these things as it relates to that slide. I start seeing things with their eyes, Their eyes start showing, they're bloodshot and watery, their inability to cross their eyes. They can't do that anymore. Their pupils, depending on their body, their dose, their toxicity, how much they've used in the past, etc., they can be normal or dilated. Here's the problem. If you're smoking marijuana during the day and all of a sudden your eyes are full-blown dilated and you go out and drive, do you think that person can see? Do you want that? Just think about when you go to an eye doctor and they dilate your eyes. Can you see when you're driving home? Generally, you have to have somebody drive for you. But you got people high on marijuana driving around with dilated eyes that can't see very well. That's why you get the left of center, the slowing down, the speeding up. They just can't see right. They start overreacting. Reaction to light, their blood pressure and their pulse goes up. As the marijuana goes into the lungs, it crosses the blood-brain barrier, or that barrier in your lungs, and goes right up to your brain. It's not like alcohol where it goes into your lower intestines, diffuses through there, and then hits the bloodstream. It's happening within minutes. Your muscle tone can be normal. Your body temp generally goes up. Chronic users, the body temperature is usually down below 98.6. Marijuana, we'll start to see peaks within 10 to 30 minutes, but the onset is within minutes, usually 1 to 3. Duration, usually 2 to 3. With impairment, we can see up to 24 hours in clinical signs, blood pressure, pulse, temp, things like that. We start looking at Marinol or dronabinol, the pharmaceutical grade marijuana that's currently produced. It's a synthetic drug. It's dispensed in Walgreens and CVS. It's manufactured. It's there, but the onset is 30 to 60 minutes with a peak of 2 to 4, and then the appetite up to 24 hours. General indicators, this is what you're going to see. This is what you can use to look to see if your parents are using or your children are using marijuana. They're going to have bloodshot, watery eyes. Generally speaking, that's what you're going to have. And that's why they have the clear eyes. Odor of marijuana, marijuana debris in the mouth, body tremors, and increased appetite. Relaxed inhibitions. I see this a lot. Kids want to talk to me, they think it's cool. Instead of being, if I put you guys in my car, you're probably going to be paranoid. You're probably going to be a little nervous, a little anxious. Kids that are high on marijuana, no, they just want to hang out and chill with me. Possible paranoia, impaired perception of time. They can't tell what time it is and be within a couple minutes. Here you go. A friend indeed is a friend with weed is a friend indeed. I would smoke weed with a goat in a boat, with a bear with no hair, and jail with no bail. I do, I like weed. The stuff is out there. You can go to a bongathon and toke it up with a bunch of people. And they have those 420 events in Colorado, in Washington, and Oregon, and California. Social media, this is where your kids are getting their information. I had some kids tell me they got it from medical journals at the school when I was talking to them. No, you don't. You're getting it from your friends, you're getting it from social media, you're getting it from other places other than medical journals, I'm sorry. 71% of them are getting their information from Facebook, and then 41% from Snapchat, and then Google, Twitter. Brands, logos, and drugs. If you start seeing your kids wearing this stuff, you better be looking and you better be paying attention, because this is how they're associating themselves with other kids and letting them know that they smoke marijuana. The gigolos down here on the bottom, that's all marijuana use. The dancing bears, dab in and out. If you don't know what that is, it's not In-N-Out Burger in California, trust me. They're talking dabs. This right here, dirty ghetto kids, top left-hand corner. Yeah, there's no marijuana associated with it. That's Sirzap. That's promethazine and codeine and Sprite. It's popular among the hip hop and rap group, but it's poly-drug use. They're sipping on that while they're smoking marijuana. UPS, United Pot Smokers, and then you've got vehicles like this with Shaggy and Scooby. And yes, I saw one going down the highway in Colorado. Here's your edibles. And I showed that to you earlier. That's the same thing with liquid too. People think that this right here is one serving of marijuana-infused Rockstar. This is actually paraphernalia. But they drink the whole thing when actually they're supposed to drink a little bit out of a time, because there might be actually 10 to 15 servings in this, and it's not just one serving. And that's another problem we have with liquid-infused marijuana. You go in, you can get your medical marijuana card, just like that. Instead of going in and seeing your doctor and spending a couple minutes, or 15, 20 minutes and filling out a medical marijuana or a medical form with all your medical history. 5, 10 minutes, you're in and out, and the doctor's recommending marijuana. Penalty classifications, it's an infraction, folks. Marijuana is an infraction, $100 fine. And then everything else, it goes up after that, $300 to $500. Anything over an ounce, less than a pound, is a class 3A misdemeanor, $500 fine. And then if it's over a pound, it's a class 4 felony, 0 to 5 years. Okay, that's what we're looking at when we talk about decriminalized marijuana. If you're arrested for driving under the influence of a drug and a DRE forms the opinion that you're under the influence of cannabis, it's a class W misdemeanor. It's just like your first offense DUI. 6-month license revocation, you have a fine with it. All right. Final message as we start to, this is from Colorado DOT. I appreciate your time, 1 hour. I try to give you as much information as I can, but there's a lot more that I can present to you if I had more time.